for a leader to be able to amplify the trust with your employees, with your customers, with your stakeholders is very, very critical now than ever so, right? Because you are not having the physical contact anymore. You're not able to have workplace meetings. You're not able to visit customers as much as you used to do in the past. You're not able to, go out and kind of have in-person interactions, right? So the trust both with your employees and customers and partners is very important because ultimately they need to know that you are with them.
This is episode number 111 of The Inspiring Talk with Nikhil Arora. Welcome back inside yet another episode of The Inspiring Talk. My name is Bijay Gautam. I'm your host for this show. Each week, I interview today's most successful and inspiring personalities to help you realize your inner potential. Having known Nikhil for 3 years, the thing that I admire a lot about Nikhil is that he's one of those leaders who is constantly pushing boundaries, both in the business as well as in his personal life. Nikhil has completed 4 triathlons, including Ironman, which is considered as one of the toughest sporting events that test your physical and mental strengths. He has completed 30 full and half marathons in different parts of the world. Nikhil is the Vice President and Managing Director of GoDaddy India. Prior to this, he launched and led the Asia operations for WeWork. He was awarded the Economic Times Most Promising Business Leaders of Asia 2019. He recently published an ebook called The Subtle Shifts of Radical Change, where he talks about how you can navigate the everyday shifts in business, work, and leadership in the post-COVID world. In this conversation, we'll discuss how the work culture is shifting in post-COVID world, how you can adapt to this and succeed, how leaders can stay relevant, how can we find strength and agility to deal with tough times, and a lot more. Let's jump in. Welcome back inside yet another episode of The Inspiring Talk, and I'm super excited to have Nikhil Arora with me. Nikhil, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting.
So Nikhil, we bumped into each other at Airtel Delhi Half Marathon in 2018, where you had just completed a run and your wife was also running. We had a brief conversation about how you started making outdoor activity, part of your family's life and so on. Being someone who is so passionate about running, how have you been adapting to this whole situation since the last year?
Yes, thank you for reminding. We met at the completion of the Airtel Half Marathon. I think that was the year I was pacing a few first-time runners, and it was an awesome experience. But talking about last 12 months, right? I think it's been really, I would say, resetting for everything we do, right? And from a wellness and fitness perspective, one of the things I had got used to early on because of my work travels was how to find ways to keep fit if you're not able to find outdoor activities, especially when I would travel from, one city to the other or sometimes one country to another. So over years, I had developed this regime of, having some indoor ways to keep fit and just, do at least the basic stuff, right? I would always carry things like a TRX. TRX is a very portable workout equipment. You just need a hook to hang up on a door, or other things. So I think just having the mindset, I think the important thing is, if your mindset is to say, I got to find an hour, whether I'm indoor or outdoor, to do my workout and keep myself mentally and physically fit, that works. And I think that at least helped me a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and now it's pretty evident that there is nothing called as going back to normal. With the second wave right now hitting hard, we don't even know when this is going to end. So in this scenario, how we as an individuals can, let's say, find the strength and agility to get excited about the future and, see the opportunity in the future?
Yes. So one of the outcomes of last year's lockdown and the unfortunate situation, I ended up writing a book, as you know, called The Subtle Shifts of Radical Change. And the book really talks about the question you asked. what is the new normal? What is the current normal? And what would be, the future? And I kind of just broke down the book a bit into maybe 5 segments, right? And when I say 5 segments, like I call them GDP, though there are 5 attributes under the GDP. G being the role of the government in our life. The role of government is
Mm.
certainly lot powerful and impactful, both at a business level and at a personal level, right? Because
Yeah.
when there is a lockdown, what is open, what is shut, what healthcare facilities are open, available, right? So the role of government has certainly taken a new meaning in our lives. The D part was around digitization and
Hmm.
deglobalization, I think, and we can talk more about that. And then the P part is more about public private partnership and purpose driven. I think all of us, both as businesses and as individuals, I think the awakening of purpose in life and purpose in business has come to the forefront, right? So when I talk about GDP, it's really the government, the digitization, deglobalization, purpose, and public-private partnership, which has taken front and center. And there are a lot of themes we can talk about which are underlining beneath these kind of main topics.
Yeah, and we have seen with the onset of pandemic kind of people, right? So one set of people who went ahead and said that, you know what, I'm going to wait for all of this to get over, and kept complaining, saying that, hey, this is really bad, whether that's for the business or employee doing the job, and I just can't wait to the world to get back normal. And there are other set of people like who have the mindset of saying that, oh, you know what, it seems like it's not gonna change anytime sooner, and it's better that I adapt to this and that kind of accept this and move forward, right? So then, are there any traits that you think can really help people succeed in the post COVID world, and adapting to the shift that's happening right now?
Firstly, I think navigating this current uncertainty, right? It's really about, I would say, a discovery driven journey with fair amount of uncertainty and a lot of pivots and a lot of inflection points up and down, right? So I think having the mindset to be able to embrace uncertainty and having the mindset to perhaps know that there are more questions than answers, I think is a good start because it helps your mind train better that it is going to be a slow and steady discovery driven process, right? Secondly, I think we all should understand that it's almost like a beginner's mindset because nobody has ever seen this kind of time frame, right? Where none of us have been through like a pandemic like this, right? So it's kind of everything is leveled. We are
Mm.
all on the same plane as beginners, right? Trying to
Mm.
figure out what's going on and what's not going on, right? And so be able to use that approach and say, okay, I am as good as the next best person because he or she has the same information. But it's about instincts, right? Being able to be comfortable with not a lot of data, some data, because data is changing every day, real time, right? So be able to process, like what used to happen in the past, right? We would look at historical pattern, make some sense of it, and perhaps apply to the future. In this situation, there is no historical pattern, right? So how
Mm.
do we take more of the recency frequency principle, right? The last day's data is as it's the most critical one. Maybe 2 days data is actually old and it doesn't
Mm.
apply, right? So be able to take the recent data, apply some gut and instinct to it, and being able to be comfortable with knowing that it's not going to be 100% foolproof or bulletproof approach. I think is going to be, is the approach I recommend, right? And then the other thing is also, just to kind of be comfortable with your own company, because as we are not being getting exposed to a lot of group interactions and all that stuff, right? How do you get comfortable with your own company? And that doesn't mean you stop socializing, right? Whatever way you can socialize through Zoom or Skype or through WebEx or whatever that may be, but being able to be okay, with your own company is important. And lastly, the importance of, I would say, keeping your mind healthy because, with so much information overload and so much negative information and negative, I don't mean in a wrong way, but because of what's happening, right? Your mind can certainly get deviated towards that, right? So kind of training your mind to be focusing on the positives and just kind of sometimes tuning out is actually okay,
Yeah.
because sometimes knowing not too much is also okay because that helps your mind kind of get calmed and then it's recharged and and the next day you can start much fresher.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you say that it's a level playing field for everyone, right? The data that we had in the past doesn't make sense anymore. And being a leader, you running a company and seeing this kind of change, right? Massive change that's coming your way that all of us dealing with it. So for you, Nikhil, what it means to become a leader in the post-pandemic world where what should we know? Where are we getting into with the whole thing?
I talk about this in my book about shifts on the leadership attributes. And, first of all, I think the importance of trust for a leader to be able to amplify the trust with your employees, with your customers, with your stakeholders is very, very critical now than ever. So, right? Because you are not having the physical contact anymore. You're not able to have workplace meetings. You're not able to visit customers as much as you used to do in the past. You're not able to, go out and kind of have in-person interactions, right? So the trust both with your employees and customers and partners is very important because ultimately they need to know that you are with them, right? You understand their problems, you understand their situation. Maybe you don't have a solution, right? But having the opportunity to create that trust, is very important. Secondly, I think the boundaries between home and workplace are gone, right? Because when
Yeah.
we're going through these video calls, you're sitting in your employee's home and employees are sitting in your home. And so how do you make sure as a leader you're making them comfortable?
Mm.
Because ultimately somebody's living in a small house, somebody's living in a big house, somebody has different personal situation, their kids at home, they are older parents at home. So how do you as a leader make sure you minimize that kind of a stress for the employees, as they're working through? And then also, the focus on employee well-being has becomes a very integral part of leader. How do you provide tools and avenues for your employees or your customers or your partners to be able to keep their kind of physical well-being and mental well-being well, right? So I think one has to take an extra interest in that and put more efforts into that because no longer your work life and home life are separate anymore, right? I mean, they're kind of now all integrated. And I think, I talk about in the book as to what importance a leader plays every day. Like, for example, in lockdowns, I was on the phone with my customers every night or every morning, just understanding the pulse of the situation they are facing, because that could have been different than what I was facing, right? In
Yeah.
that sense, providing our employees maybe access to online tools, whether it's fitness classes, whether it's spiritual classes, whether it's meditation classes and so on, right? And then, making sure health benefits, the way they were designed perhaps were very different. In these times, what exceptions can we make, right? Because it's important. There are different exceptions now than ever, right? I mean, things about providing information to our customers and employees, right? We realized that people are locked down at home, so we created a GoDaddy Academy because people were wanting to use their time and learn, and we said, what better way to help them educate themselves now because they have a lot of time on their hand, right? So I think that's really about the leadership. And my last thing is, it also gives everybody an opportunity to become a leader now because, again, as I go back to the leveling field, right? Everything is leveled, and so even a 24-year-old will have perhaps the same experience as a 48-year-old because both of them have not seen the pandemic in any different way, right?
Yeah.
So it gets an opportunity to rise above kind of what would be the traditional leadership criteria may have been.
Yeah. From the work culture perspective, right? You kind of shared a bit about working from the home and making the employees comfortable and stuff like that. As we can see, right, we are not going to office anytime soon, and I think a lot of companies down the line are going to adapt this culture. And you have also said that people are going to more move towards the freelance economy, where instead of just working for one company full time, then people will be working for multiple things. Then what are the kind of things that we'll start seeing on that front?
I think first of all, it's important to kind of continue to reskill yourself, especially around digitization, right? Because all of us have some form of structure continue to learn about new things which are coming in the digital world, right? The AI, bots, I mean, you name it, right? I mean, there's just things happening, but at least make sure you're doing the basics because I think the speed of digitization, what took us 10 years is now happened in 10 months, right?
Yeah.
So that's really accelerating at a phenomenal speed. So that's number one. Number two, I think the world of freelancing, I think whether you're an external employee or whether you're an internal employee, I think we all should think about ourselves as freelancers, because even companies who will ultimately, some of them are actually downsizing, right? They will look at employees as multi-skilled, multifunctional, soft skill, hard skill kind of a talent pool, right? And in that way, being able to give that toolkit to your employees would be very important, right? So whether you're a marketing expert, but you need to know other things, right? So I think like before, freelance was an outside concept. Now I think it will also become an internal concept, right? And then lastly, I think some industries are going to go through a lot of resetting, sadly, right? Hospitality, travel, event management, physical event management. So how do you, if you are from those industries, right, how do you reskill yourself, right? If you're in an event industry, a lot will move digitization, right? So how do you become an event management company, but being able to, using digital skills, right? If you're in hospitality and travel, maybe domestic travel is going to increase more than, international travel. So how do you pivot your model? So in that sense, I think very important. And lastly, I think entrepreneurship, right? This is going to be a great time because the problem is so big that multiple stakeholders will be needed to solve it. So, for example, healthcare, right? I'll give you an example, right? Telemedicine. Nobody was ever comfortable with that. All of us are living with that, right? We would always want to visit the doctor, but now all of us do telemedicine, right?
Yeah.
And so everybody's used to it. There is a lot of these grassroots innovation, which was always there, but it was never executed because our mindset was different. But, now it's there. Another example is people will travel 3 hours for a 1 hour meeting, maybe from Gurgaon to Noida or wherever, right? And now people are realizing, I don't need to do that, right? I mean, if it's just a 1 hour meeting, why should I spend 4 hours, on the road? And before it was more of a trust thing, right? Okay, if I see the person face to face, I feel more important and so on. And I think it's just getting comfortable in a new way of doing business, right? And I think, as employees, you have to find ways to be more efficient and more productive because let's be honest, right? It is a challenge, right? Because when you're sitting at home, you have a learning curve to be productive because you have things around you. Some people are not home working people. So you have to find your own rhythm slowly and steadily, how to become, efficient and productive. So there are a lot of apps out there which you can kind of look at for being more productive, managing your time, managing your tasks, because it can become challenging doing that.
Yeah, and absolutely. Like, working from home, as you said, right, the lines are getting more blurry than ever, right? You just don't know what's the working time. And also, when you are working from home, it's for the people at the home as well to not take the work seriously as well. I think that's one of the, great skills that everybody can now, learn of defining that, hey, you know what, this is my work time. And it's almost like I'm at the office and, taking that seriously. And I think for the leaders as well to kind of train the team because we have never had that kind of exposure, right? Of like, sitting at the home and still ensuring that I still do the same amount of work or maybe more because I have more time now working out of the homes. So are there any specific tools or anything tips that you'd like to give that you personally use to be more productive, while working from home with 2 kids that you have?
Yeah, it took me a while to kind of find my, rhythm, and I'm still finding it. But I will tell you a few things I've been doing, right? I mean, I find that, when you get up in the morning, deciding what to do and what not to do has become more important. Because, what happens is if you wake up in the morning and you start looking at emails and messages, your agenda gets hijacked because now you're working for everybody else. And I don't mean it in a bad way, right? Because when people have sent you messages and emails and everything, I mean, and they are now coming like, it's like flooding with messages, right?
Yeah.
And you start answering one, you start answering other, and slowly what you set out for yourself in the day does not happen. So first thing I do is I actually don't look at my emails and WhatsApp in the morning.
Yeah.
I just go back and say, okay, here are the 5 things minimum I need to achieve today. And I make that list before I start anything because then it helps me. Okay, I got to do these things. I realize the first 2-3 hours are more productive than probably the rest of the day because you slowly ultimately get hijacked. I tend to finish those most important tasks in the first half of the day, in perhaps the peak time I feel like, which I need to do, right? Because I feel like that's the most critical one. I try to do more the mundane messaging and all that stuff, responding in a downtime like lunch and something, right? And so
Mm.
on. Because I feel like if it's so time critical, somebody will call you, right? If
Yeah.
it's like a life and death, obviously people will call you. Otherwise, you pick your time in that sense. Also, I tend to break, tend to stand up at work. Also, I had my standing desks because I feel like it, gets your blood flowing and, keeps your body posture much better. So now that home, I don't have that facility. I tend to also find a place where I could just take some calls or video calls while standing up, because again, it just helps you change the monotony of the work, right? And so, and, if your house permits, depending on your situation, I have, maybe at least two places I worked, in my home, maybe because I just change corners. Sometimes that helps, right? And so on. And sometimes there's no lockdown. I do my one-on-one sometime on the phone while walking outside. All of us don't get enough of sun in India. You need the vitamin D. So go out and do a 30-minute walk and take a call while doing that. It just freshes your mind and keeps you, again, kind of focused in that way. And then, I think just saying no to things is more important now than ever, right? I mean, because there are a lot more requests coming everybody's way. No matter what line of business you are, there are a lot of requests coming. And sometimes you can get overwhelmed because you want to help everybody.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just can't. And it's okay to say no and address, right? So I think the most important thing I've learned is, and I'm still learning, is, what to say no to. Because you want to help people, you want to help everything. But sometimes you just also make sure, right? I mean, they say, when you're flying, they always say, right, that if it's shortage of oxygen, you put your air mask first on yourself
That's true.
before putting onto other. And apply you have to apply the same principle, because you got to make sure you are okay mentally, physically, your time wise, your productivity wise, and then you plan everything around it.
Yeah. Nikhil, earlier you mentioned about, the mental health aspect of it. And for us as an individual, because we are locked at our homes and not much of a socializing, and, often feels like I'm alone in this, while we all are in this together, but it feels like I'm alone in this. And, that's one aspect of it, like how we as an individual can ensure that, we are taking care of our mental health, because it's more important than ever, because of the whole thing. It can get pretty lonely at times, being at homes and not going out and not being able to share your things with others. That's one side of things. And what are the things that as a leaders can ensure for their teammates, saying that they stay at the peak of the health? What are some of the things that we can do as individual and as a leader to ensure that team stays at the peak of their mental health?
Yeah, I think mental well-being, is already a challenge way before, but I think the pandemic certainly has taken it to a very unfortunately extreme levels, right? So first of all, I think we should do the basics, right? Keep checking on your friends, families, colleagues, partners, customer, because nobody, talks about it very openly. A few people do, but many don't. So it's important to be able to reach out to your close circle and even your work circle and anybody within your circle. Just inquire to see how you're doing. A lot of time people just need to talk. You may not have a solution, but people just need to talk, and people need to know that somebody's there to talk, right? So
Hmm.
that matters a lot. Secondly, I think create avenues for your employees to be able to access some tool which is giving them some sort of a space. So for example, right, tools like Headspace, right, those are meditation apps, right? Now it's not for everybody. Some people may want to do yoga, some people may want to just
Yeah.
listen to music, but provide known things which have worked, right? During the pandemic, we did some online concerts for our employees. We did some yoga sessions. We also provided access to certain apps which are around meditation and mental well-being. And also we would just have meetings which were just about doing nothing, right? In the old world, there used to be the water cooler chats, right? So how do we just have meetings
Yeah.
over video technology, which are just no agenda meetings, right?
Yeah.
Things also like reduce the kind of calls overburdened, right? If you just need a 10-minute video call, just have a 10-minute video call versus
Yeah.
originally there used to be a minimum of 30 minutes. We don't need
Mm,
30 minutes. So that mindset helps both employees get less, stressed and so on.
absolutely. So, Nikhil, for you personally, what are the three biggest lessons that you have learned at a personal level since we went into this pandemic and the lockdown? If you have to put them into like three biggest lessons.
My dad in his early days, it reminds me of a quote by Mark Twain, which was like, when I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant, I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was so astonished at how much he had learned in 7 years. So essentially, it was more about your own learning
Beautiful.
than it. And, my dad used to, and I dedicated this book to him because in the 90s and in the 2000s when I was living in the US, my dad had taken a very keen interest in disaster recovery and planning and crisis management, right? Both at the business and government level. And, on his visits, when he used to visit me when I was in New York and Chicago, he would ask me to like call all these disaster recovery crisis management organizations to send brochures and information. And I used to get so irritated by, I'm like, he would take every day asking me this, and we would have a two suitcases full of these when he would take it back, to India. And those were, when everything was not online. And, when the pandemic hit, I realized what he was thinking in those days, that
Mm,
as businesses and as households, and we hardly plan for this because we had got so used to that unless there's an earthquake or unless there's a flood, there's nothing else which will be so called a disaster or a crisis management, right? And it just elevated that. I mean, it's astonishing to say how many of us were not prepared for this. And let's be honest, right? We can say, yes, right? I mean, and how many businesses were not prepared for it, right? And businesses, for example, what's your business continuity plan? What
yeah.
is your, SOW of managing this, right?
Mm,
What is your plan around managing your business, managing your employees, managing your customers, and all that stuff, right? So first lesson is like we all have to have a disaster recovery and kind of business continuity plans in place, and also at a personal level, right? Because it just amplified that without that in one day everything can go go away. And I think I would say that's number one, and applies to your basic personal, professional, or any other level, right? Second, I think, I had been involved in CSR work during even the Airtel marathons and all we talked about. I'd run for causes. But I think I'm glad to see the shift towards a purpose driven mindset. It was nice to see so many people coming out and helping,
yeah.
when the whole lockdown happened, individuals, corporates, celebrities. And it was just great to see that as a society, as a community. I felt like everybody wanted to do things, but maybe they are not able to do it. But suddenly it came out, the empathy,
Yeah.
right?
Mm,
And so the purpose-driven mindset really, came about. So that was really wonderful to see. And I mean, I was fortunate enough to also involve few fundraising for daily laborers and daily musicians and a few of the foundations. So it was really nice to see that coming from everybody, right?
yeah.
And then lastly, I would say the focus on, we talked about it, mental and physical well-being. Health comes first. That's on top of the list, right? Without health, nothing matters, right? So you can chase all the commercialization in the world, but if you're not healthy, you're not going to be there to enjoy it, right? So I've seen a lot of people go through a transformation during this lockdown in a positive way. So I hope this continues, that that you are always, as an individual and as a company, focusing on the mental and physical well-being. It starts from there, and then of course goes to the other aspects, right? So I would say those three things, I think, were probably pretty big in my mind, which I've seen and hope they continue. And then of course in my book I talk about the shifts around leadership and innovation and how to really use this opportunity to sometimes have a beginner's mindset.
Absolutely, indeed. I think, I mean, for me as well, the biggest realization was that whatever you have done, and as you also mentioned, right, thus far, all of a sudden can be completely irrelevant. And then how quickly you can adapt and accept and adapt the change and like, okay, this is what it's going to be. And instead of wasting a lot of time in just complaining about the things and not kind of still saying that, oh, I'm going to wait for things to get back to normal. How quickly, what are the new ways I can do? What are the new things that I can, do, and new skills maybe I can pick to kind of adapt to this situation. So that's been the top on my. So, Nikhil, you often talk about being a missionary first before being a mercenary. Could you please explain this?
It's the part of the corporate, a purpose-driven mindset, right? And when I talk about missionary first, mercenary next, it's essentially is all about, start with a purpose in life, right? And start with a business with a purpose, right? What problem do we want to solve, and how do we want to impact the lives of people for whom we are solving the problem, right? So I think there is a proven kind of science behind that. If you're a missionary, you can always become a mercenary, meaning if you start with the problem, you start with a purpose, money and commercialization will come. But if you start with mercenary approach, which is all around, hey, I want to make more money regardless of the problem. So you cannot become a missionary from a mercenary, but you can always become a mercenary after being a missionary, right? So this is all about being a purpose-driven kind of approach, where what matters is what problem are we solving, what impact do we want to make to the problem we are solving, and then make money off it, right? And I think it helps you personally, professionally, right? Because even going back to the example we were talking about people coming out around pandemic, right? That purpose-driven approach just helps you. Actually, it helps you personally feel more fulfilling, and it actually helps in your mental well-being. Because see, what's the best thing when you're going through crisis? To solve somebody else's problem. It takes your mind, makes you feel more satisfied, makes you feel more fulfilled when you've helped somebody in need. And that's one of the other learnings, from keeping your mind more, I would say, balanced. Because no matter, sometimes you're going through a problem and it's, making your mental state more complex. When you look at somebody else's problem, you're like, oh my God, like what I was complaining about, right? Somebody is on the street and doesn't have food to eat and doesn't have transportation to go back to home, or doesn't have healthcare, and you were complaining about, oh, I'm stuck at home for 14 days and I'm kind of so it just puts everything in relativity. And so I think the importance of purpose helps your own mind state, it helps your business state, it helps you ultimately succeed and thrive. And if you look at most of the successful businesses in the world, they continue to be purpose driven. I talk about even in business, right? When you're even putting out branding messages, it's important to connect to your purpose, because I think after the lockdown, consumers have become a lot more conscious of, are you a purpose-driven brand, right? Were you there for your customers? Were you there for your other stakeholders? Were you there for your community? They value much, and their customers will become more loyal there as well.
Absolutely. So I want to now switch a little bit of a gear and looking at your own journey of being a leader and having the leadership position in different organizations. And so what would be your message to maybe 20-year-old kid who might be running in the streets, maybe distributing newspaper like you did in your 20s, or maybe, working at the gas station, but have the dreams and maybe don't know, what to do next and how to go about it. And then they just don't have anything in the sight. What would be your message to, let's say, 20 years old self?
First of all, I think, if I remember of those days, and I always keep a good diary of that, right? One was just, I think, again, I go back to purpose. My purpose was like, okay, it was never about money, but it was all about being able to, like, as I spoke about my dad, right? I always had this role model of that I want to create some sort of a name for myself in whatever small way, right? About in the line of work I do, right? So having that purpose in your mind, kind of helps you overcome and blank out a lot of obstacles which come your way, right? So again, start with a purpose, and purpose should never be money. I mean, money is an outcome. Everybody needs money. Let's be honest, it's part of living in the way we want to be, but having a more larger purpose of what success is, right, for you. So for me, it was, when I was 20, I was looking at a 3 to 5 year horizon, right? I would never look at, oh my God, for 10 years, 20 years. I felt like that was too long and it was very overwhelming. So break it up in small chunks of your lifespan, right? Second, I think just dealing with uncertainty and embracing uncertainty and not getting panicked or anxious about it. It's a muscle you develop slowly, but have that, and that can come to you through a good network of friends. So I talk about importance of networking. Like, so everybody I used to meet, in my early days, and that time you used to have those business cards, right? I would keep the business cards. I will always send a Christmas greeting to them, or a New Year greeting to them, or a Diwali greeting to them. But I kept in touch, and all the good things happened in my life in those years were because I was just keeping in touch with people in some form or structure. And when something I needed from them, whether it's even simple advice, it wasn't like I haven't spoken to them in 2 years and I call randomly to say, "Oh, I'm ask calling," right?
Mm.
People value relationships not just when you need them, but generally because they know that you're generally interested in keeping a relationship, right? So
Yeah.
investing in people and maintaining them, making your relationships count for you, not just always in a self-fulfilling way, but for helping others also. That really helped and made a lot of difference in my life. And third, I think, I always say that, hard work and commitment trumps, I would say, your IQ.
Yeah.
You're gifted with, some people are brilliant and some people are average. But if you put the hard work, put the right commitment to it, good things will come out of it, right? And I think I always felt myself to be, like I'm always chasing rather than always feeling like I've arrived, right? For in every milestone of my kind of life, right? And that always helps me keep it on my toes, right? Even today, I feel like, I always talk about having a mentor younger than you and having a mentor older than you. And if
Yeah.
you have a mentor younger than you, whether it's a 25-year-old or 35-year-old, it helps you connect with what's happening and what's going to happen in the next 20 years, right? Because at my age, I could start saying, "Oh, this is the world," and you look 10 years behind and like, hey, it's not at all the world, right? So having a younger mentor and older mentor both keep you balanced, right? So that's
Yeah.
also important in your life in that sense. So those are the few things. And again, I think just generally your network of people, most important.
Yeah.
Nothing more important than that.
Yeah, and I think I completely agree with this part, because one of the things that doing this podcast really allows me is to, tap into the mindset of a lot of these really cool people, and also, to have access and network with the people whom otherwise it would have never been possible. And I have seen, that kind of helping me in my own journey in the past 4 years of journey. Like, if there is one thing that has really helped me, then it's the network and the right kind of people, surrounding with the right kind of people, and also being there to help them, and also, asking, not hesitating to ask help when I need it from them, right? Because a lot of people also find it difficult, really difficult, to ask for help. And it's okay to ask for the help, and but also at the same time you have to resonate that by becoming, of service to them when they need, right?
Yeah, and this is a great example, right? I mean, you and I met only once at Airtel, but I think just keeping in touch,
Yeah.
and I've seen your wonderful progress of where you are now and so on, right? So I think it just for both, in this case for myself, to kind of learn a little bit more about your world and podcasting, which is evolving in such a big way, right? So I think it's just the ability to have sincere intentions about meeting people and keeping in touch with people, and not about what am I going to get from them and what are they going to give me,
Yeah.
right? I think that mindset one is changes, right? Sincerity about the intentions is very important.
Absolutely. All right, Nikhil. Now I call a segment. There's a segment which I call is the enlightening round, which is more gonna be a short answers. Real quick. I'm gonna fire some questions at you. Are you ready for this?
I'll try. Let's see, how young and dynamic my mind is.
What inspires you to do everything that you do?
Purpose. It's always, for me, it's always about purpose, right? Because and purpose changes, I'll tell you, because purpose doesn't need to be consistent. But example of, for me, like in my line of work, right, small businesses, the most affected community from pandemic, or generally they have the hardest time getting finances, right? So for me, doing one small thing, right, which can transform their life, right? Sometimes it's as good as somebody coming online and buying a domain in it that started the business and became very big, is a big thing, right? So the other one is last year, I did a fundraising with Salim Suleiman around musicians, people who sing in front of hotels and everything, and they had nothing to, feed themselves, right? And so the purpose changes in different aspects. But again, for me, that's one thing I learned from my dad was like, that as you get older, and when I see him now and in his kind of later part of his life, his level of satisfaction is so high than people perhaps in his work who may have made 10 times more money. Just the content and satisfaction, right? So I think having a purpose, and the purpose could be different in different segments of life. You wake up in the morning and you know your purpose, whether it's on a personal or professional front, gets you excited more than anything.
What is that one mindset shift, that you've had in your life at a certain point of time, which you think, had the biggest impact in your growth?
I think having belief in yourself without getting unduly influenced by negativity. And let me expand on that, right? I mean, there is a fine line between you think what's right and taking feedback and input. Now, I think you got to do a good balance of, having a belief in doing something, but also bouncing off people. But once you've done that exercise, right, stick to your belief and stick to what you think you want to do, and then not unduly get influenced by a lot of negativity, because for every one positive thing, you'll get 9 negative things. Journaling in anything. You go on social media today and look at it, you get 1 good comment and 9 bad comments on everything, right? I mean, like it's a pattern, right? I mean, and like when you do good things, nobody was going to give you a pat in the back, or maybe 1%. When you do bad things, 10 people. And then those bad things are also not that you wanted to do bad things, just happened, right? Something went wrong. So just having your mind trained to stick to belief and not get influenced by negativity in today's mind, because there's so much hate out there, especially with the onset of social media and open platforms, to be able to, stick to what you think, have the guiding principles for yourself. And once you have those guiding principles, you'll be fine. Continue to take feedback, continue to take inputs. But remember, you know yourself best. So finding your own self best is very important in that journey of getting to that belief, because everybody is different, everybody operates differently, and there is no set formula. But your ability to find yourself, in which situations do you thrive better, and which situations you don't thrive better, what kind of people you get positive energy from, and what people you get negative energy from, right? I mean, so surround yourself with 5-6 of all those positive energy people, and that helps you in achieving and keeping up with your belief.
What was the one wrong belief that you've held for the longest period of time about yourself?
I would say sometimes I wouldn't say it's wrong, but it's just a learning I had was, sometimes you undermine your own ability to impact other people's life. And I'll give you one example, right? I mean, the last 12 months, I've always been involved in CSR work, right? Wide from raising funds through a lot of my marathons and half marathons. But ability to be able to, all of us have a lot more perhaps power and impact than we think. Like, for example, last year, even there were places where some certain communities needed help because of time of crisis. And I really don't feel good about calling people for obligations, right? There's just me. I'm a very always self-sustaining. I want to be like, okay, I don't like taking. But I realized that sometimes it's, when you're trying to help others, it's okay to reach out, and there's nothing wrong in I don't want to call it word begging, but sometimes if you're helping others, right? So there were certain foundations or certain causes which needed money, and I didn't have the avenues of support, but I called somebody to say, hey, this community really needs help. Can you help them, please?
Yeah.
And that really changed, because they said, oh, yeah, sure. I mean, we would, because they had a bit of respect and regard and credibility in myself. And so they did it, right? So I just realized that it's okay to
use the influence that you have, right?
Yeah, and I know it's okay to because, for me, generally, I feel like I don't like taking obligation. But then I realized, it is for the larger good. It's okay to ask people, please go help this, and your ability to have influence, right? So all of us trust me, have that ability to influence. It's just that sometimes we just don't use it, or we have never been awakened to it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, like most of us have been awakened to in the business side of things, but I'm looking at outside the business side of things, right? I mean, I've been like sometimes even a young person has come out and read something about what perhaps I wrote, or like speaking in this case, and it connected with them, right? So I feel like it's important to keep sharing back, giving back also, because again, the value of influence, and it's unrelated to your age. You know, a 20-year-old will have the same power to be able to influence than a 40-year-old, right? So I think all of us need to recognize that, and I think once we recognize that, we are able to put out and just be fearless in that, right? Because there's not a wrong or right approach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just put it out there.
Absolutely. So could you share a book or two that has influenced you personally in the recent past?
Firstly, not to be self-serving. I think my my book of subtle shifts or radical change, it's not about my book per se. I just felt like the way this book started, Vijay, was
Mhm.
when I was sitting on a lot of these video calls. I realized
Yeah.
there was so much learning coming during
Mm.
the lockdown from different people, right? I mean, how
Absolutely.
the police was using now a Segway to patrol the streets. How local grocery stores were now finding ways to deliver medicines to you, and there's so many inventions happening, right? So I realized there's so much happening, and then using that process to be able to bring it in a book format. And my reason was that I didn't want that knowledge to get lost. So that was certainly one, right? I mean, other than that, I think there's a book called Accidental Ironman, which I relate to because I was never meant to be an athlete, but
Yeah.
I actually only started running after I was 40 years old, and having done like 30 marathons and half marathons and doing 2-3 Ironmans, right? I mean, I think so that was very relatable. Good to Great is a great business book, right? It's always continues to give some new insights into as a leader, right? How do you go from an average person to become a great person? Recently I had experience to meet Miss Kiran Bedi, and some of the books she has written around are very inspiring. I mean, one of the books
Yeah.
that talked about was stories of 13 kids who actually grew up in jail,
Mm.
and they've all gone out and did great things. So that's one. And I've always read books on Mahatma Gandhi, just about his ability to be able to inspire millions of people, right? In the times, there was a book about It's Still Me, which is all about how after you suffered a medical kind of condition, that you're able to still live life, right? So I think they're kind of all dimensions. There's a book about the Nike founder Shoe Dog, which talks about how
Mm.
Nike actually never wanted to be a company which has become, right, and but some
Yeah.
interesting kind of learnings there. So normally I don't now read a lot of books at full length, to be honest. I take small bites,
Mm.
because again I think it's become quite a with so much time pressure right now. So I go out and pick up small bites from
Mm.
from different parts about whether they're related to business, whether they're related to personal development, right? Like Robin Williams talks about and so there's just a lot of good stuff out there around small bites.
Awesome. Absolutely. I linked Nikhil's book, The Subtle Shifts of Radical Change, on the description of this episode. Make sure that you pick that up. Nikhil kind of answers the questions on what are the roles leaders can play in decision making, what are the future of work look like, the pace of change and how do you handle that, and how do you move from certainty or entitlement to humility. It's a beautiful read. You would enjoy reading The Subtle Shifts of Radical Change. I'll link that up on the description. Nikhil, I have one last question that I want to ask you. But before I ask you that question, if people would like to reach out to you, get to learn more about you or your book, or generally the work that you do, what is the best possible way to reach out to you?
Yeah, so I'm quite active on my Instagram channel. It's nikhilorora.official. You connect up there and follow. I keep posting things out there. And, of course, I have my LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook, but I try to stay more active on Instagram and a little bit of LinkedIn. Twitter, I do only when I need to, because
Yeah,
there is a lot of, as I said, it's just a channel which is great. And sometimes it just has
yeah,
its own shadows.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, Instagram is the best one, Vijay. And the other thing, Vijay, if I may ask,
yes.
just make one comment, which I forgot to make earlier, was One of the things also as an opportunity as a community is this pandemic has given us to include women workforce
Yeah.
into the world because, and I mentioned this in my book, right? When pandemic happened, in all these video calls, right, the Zoom call or these conferences, women representation was less than 10%. And it wasn't by design, but I feel like because now we only have 20% of women workforce in our employment in the country,
Mm.
we want
Mm-hmm.
to change that to 40%. And this opportunity gives a great thing, right? Because before there were commute problems, women sometimes play multiple roles and have,
Yeah.
more responsibility. Now we have a perfect opportunity to, as leaders, as businesses, to include and drive the women workforce, pay equality, inclusion equality, and so on, right? So I just wanted to mention that because I think this is a great opportunity and a gift given
Yeah.
to us to be able to, move that metric, a lot further.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that. And I think, for us as well, even if it's a small, tiny startup, we have, ensured that we have like a very good representation of gender, people from the different walks of life. Thank you for pointing that out. So here's the last question, Nikhil. Imagine you are standing on a stage and this is the largest stadium that has ever been built in the history of the world. And there are millions and millions of people on that stadium. And you have been given only 1 minute of time to share the most important lesson that you have learned in your life. What would be your message?
I think it's just a simple statement, it's not how good you are, but how great you can be. And to me, it's always about, greatness lies in all of us. We don't have to create greatness. God has given us greatness in all of us. It's just our job to find that and use that and really, kind of get better and better at that, right? So a lot of us are good at things when we are in life.
Yeah.
From good to great, that journey is all about discovering your own
Yeah.
self. And sometimes it's not about learning 20 new things. You have some natural greatness in you. And sometimes you can only find it through interactions with others. Others actually help you find that. And once you found that, I think the road becomes a lot more exciting and fulfilling.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nikhil, for being on the show. It's been an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you, and good luck to your venture, and certainly seeing some great things coming out of your venture. And so keep up the great work, and I hope to learn more things about podcasting and how to be much better at that.
Awesome.
All right, take care.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Inspiring Talk with Nikhil Arora. I hope you learned something or got some inspiration. You can find the show notes of this episode with all the resources mentioned at theinspiringtalk.com/111. That is theinspiringtalk.com/111. And if you'd like to send a voice message to me, sharing your feedback for the show, you can do that by visiting theinspiringtalk.com/SPEAK. Speak. I'll link that on the description. Thanks again for listening. I'll catch you in the next. Now, go out there and do something inspiring.